Hi boys and girls, it's Mrs. J. Thanks for joining me this morning. Today I want to talk to you about the third poetry type that we're going to be talking about in our unit for poetry. So far you've learned about haiku, you've learned about cinquain poems, and this week our poem has a special name. It's a Diamante poem, and that might remind you of the word diamond. And your poem, because of the number of the words and the way that they're laid out in this poem, sort of take on the shape of a diamond. So that's how they come up with a Diamante poem. We also do Diamante poems after we do cinquain poems, because cinquain poems and Diamante poems are similar, except that cinquain poems write about one subject and the word in your top line and bottom line are the same. The thing that's different with the Diamante poem is that now you're going to have two subjects and they will be opposites. And you'll have one word at the top and one word at the bottom. The top half of your poem will describe the top word and the bottom half will describe the bottom word. You're also still going to need adjectives, nouns, and verbs, so that's really important too, and so that's a tie-in to our cinquain poem. So let's talk a little bit about Diamante poems, and then we'll do some examples, and we'll go over them together so that you'll be ready to tackle some of those this week on your own. So a Diamante poem is about opposite. It describes two opposite things, places, emotions, or ideas. So the first thing I had for things is cats and dogs. And I have an example poem for you about a Diamante about cats and dogs. Whenever you think about opposites, cats and dogs is a really good example. You could think of hot and cold. You could think of like a mountaintop or a valley. You could think of all different kinds of opposite things. You could think about a little kitten and a tiger, a little guppy versus a shark. Any two kinds of opposite things you can write a Diamante about. Some of the other examples for Diamantes that you could write about are places. You could talk about the sun and the moon. You could talk about the beach and the North Pole. You could talk about the ocean and the desert. Any kinds of those two opposites would work great for this poem. Emotions, happy and sad. That's a really good opposite emotion. And ideas, summer and winter. You know, just the idea of what it's like in summer, some of the things you do in the summer, some of the things you do in winter, opposite. So you always want to think of two words in your head first before you start your poem that have to do with opposites. And they can be about things in nature, they can be about real things, you know, just like haikus and cinquains. The rules varied a little bit. Haikus were mostly about nature. Cinquains can be about anything. Diamante poems can be about anything too. So let's take a look at the recipe for our Diamante poem. And this should look a little familiar to you, like I said, with the cinquain poem, because we've got nouns and adjectives and verbs. Now you probably noticed that I wrote my poem recipe in two different colored markers, because if you remember, I told you the top half of the poem describes the word at the top. The bottom half of the poem describes the word at the bottom. And you can see here the 4-line sentence that I have right in the middle. In a cinquain poem, it talked about a 4-word expression or a feeling or a little sentence about the topic. These 4 words are a little different in that this is where your poem splits, or this is where it flip-flops. So the first 2 words will be nouns that have to do with the subject at the top. The second 2 words will have to do with the subject at the bottom. So you'll start with a noun at the top, your first example of your opposite. You'll have 2 adjectives to describe that. 3 verbs, remember those are ing words. And then 2 things or objects or places that would remind you or have to do with the top noun. Then you have to kind of click that switch in your brain, and now you need to start describing and thinking about the word at the bottom. Now I noticed when I did a practice Diamante for myself, sometimes it's hard to switch gears like that, thinking about one topic and then thinking about the opposite. So if you start from the bottom and you want to work up you can do that. So if you want to do the noun, your opposite word at the bottom, and then write your 2 describing words, and then your 3 ing words, and then save the 2 noun words for last, you can do that. You just want to make sure that maybe when you write out your poem, when you do a rough draft, you have 1 line, 2 lines, 3 lines, 4 in the middle, and then going down you have 3, 2, and then 1. So let's look at an example of a Diamante poem. And I picked cats and dogs just because I thought that was a really nice, easy opposite example. I was able to quickly think of words off the top of my head. So I did cat and dog. Let me put some more tape on this. Okay, sorry while I stand up. Okay, so I have, whoops, I've got to tip this back up a little. There we go. Okay, so I can get it all in. So I have cat at the top, and I have dog at the bottom. And if you see, I again used 2 different colored markers just for your example. Now you don't have to do that. You can if you want to. Like if you want to use 2 different colored pencils, if that helps you at the beginning to kind of get used to the 2 opposite ideas or the 2 halves of the poem that go together, that's okay. So I started with cat. I did my 2 describing words. I did cuddly and soft. Then my 3 ing words. I had purring, laying, and pouncing. And then when I thought about a cat, I was like, what 2 things remind me of a cat? I picked yarn and catnip. Now, the second 2 words of this middle line, as you can see now, they're written in orange. These 2 words now, this is where your poem flip-flops, and this is now where you need to start talking about your word at the bottom. So now when I thought about a dog, I thought, what 2 things or objects do I think of when I think about a dog? And I wrote ball and leash. My 3 verbs, barking, growling, and running. My 2 adjectives are playful and loyal. And then my other opposite word is dog. Now the interesting thing about Diamante poems is that you can read them from top to bottom, or they should also make sense from bottom to top because you're following the same formula. So we just went through that poem from top to bottom, but you can also read it backwards. I could read it as dog, loyal, playful, running, growling, barking, leash, ball, catnip, yarn, pouncing, laying, purring, soft, cuddly, cat. Okay, so there's a Diamante poem about cats and dogs and opposites. So let's read a poem together. Well, I know I always say that, but it's actually a poem I have, but you can be with me in spirit as we write it. So another easy opposite that I thought of that would be fun to write a poem about is summer and winter, because there's tons of things you could write about for summer and winter. So I need 7 lines for my poem. Let me see if I can, oh good, I can get the edge of the chart paper in there. So I'm going to start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to start with summer. And I'm going to put winter at the bottom. Okay, so we can have summer at the top, winter at the bottom. Can you hear Ellie barking? The front door is open. She must be barking at somebody walking by. Can't get a minute's peace with that front door open. To follow the formula, we have 1 word at the top, 1 word at the bottom. Then remember, we want 2 adjectives, 3 ing words. We want our 4 nouns in the middle. And then we're going to work backwards. So then we'll have 3 more ing words. And then 2 describing words. And then winter. So I'm going to start, I'm going to use opposite colored markers. So let's start with summer. So when I think of 2 describing words for summer, I think of hot and sticky. So I think of hot and sticky. Then I need 3 verbs, 3 ing words. And I thought of swimming, biking, and camping. Now, remember, these 2 words have to describe my word up at the top. So 2 things that have to do with summer, 2 nouns, 2 things that I think of are objects. I think of pool and sunblock. All right, so there's the first half of my poem that has to do with summer. So I have my noun, I have 2 adjectives, 3 verbs, and then 2 more nouns, 2 things that have to do with my word at the top. Now I'm going to switch and I'm going to write my poem about winter. So when I think about winter, 2 things, 2 nouns that I think of in winter are coats and gloves. I don't go anywhere without my coats and gloves. So I have a nice warm coat. I wear a coat. And I wear gloves. Okay. Now I need 3 words, ing words, verbs, that would be winter activities. So I'm going to pick sledding, skating, and shivering. So there's my 3 ing words: sledding, skating, shivering. 2 describing words. I'm going to pick icy and cold. And then that describes winter. So you can see here then my 2 words in the middle, the second half of my line, talk about winter. And so there's my summer, winter, Diamante. So I have summer, hot, sticky, swimming, biking, camping, pool, sunblock, coat, gloves, sledding, skating, shivering, icy, cold, winter. And the poem will be just as great if I read it backwards and I started with all of my winter things and I flip-flop over in the middle and then I ended up talking about summer. So there's an example of how to write a Diamante poem. Remember, you want 2 subjects of opposite things, and then you need 2 adjectives, 3 verbs, 2 objects that have to do with the top subject, and then you're going to flip-flop 2 objects for the bottom subject, and then the bottom half of your poem will describe your second opposite word. So I'm going to take this down one more time so that you can see the formula. Okay, so in case you want to stop the video maybe when you're writing an example or working on some of your rough drafts, or you could go back a little bit. You could stop it on the cat and dog poem, or you could stop it on the summer winter poem, if that helps you to see the actual words better, to kind of know the types of words you'd be looking for on each of those example lines. So anyway, so that's our Diamante poem. I hope you have fun coming up with some of those this week. We might talk about them in our Google Meets, but see how you do. Have fun. Write a bunch, see how many opposites you can come up with, and good luck and have fun with that. Thank you.